And just like that, we are back with chapter 53 of the universe according to Mugsy. I am Mugsythecreator. Today is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024, and we have so much to talk about. In fact, this is the very reason we hit record just about 12 months ago. We said, this is insane. The whole next year is going to be insane. 2024 is going to be unlike anything we had ever seen before. And this was prior to Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin, Cat Williams explaining that this will be the year of Hollywood revelations. All of the things we discussed in the last year, politics, that entire crazy campaign for president, as if there was any chance anyone other than Donald Trump had a chance. All of the things we did were all building up to this moment, these times right now. We're starting to get to crunch time, guys. Are you paying attention? Do you have your helmets on? Have you been watching Surviving Barstool? Are you a Gilly fan? That guy that's been wearing a fucking helmet around all the time. It's about time that you guys really started paying attention to the things that matter to you. And I don't know which stories those are going to be. I don't even know if we're going to cover them. I don't know what is actually going to resonate with the audience. So if there's something that we don't get into, I promise you, if you reach out, I will give you my thoughts in some way, shape, or form, because they are important, articulate, and well thought out, because this is not my fucking first rodeo, okay? That's what you guys should all be very good at seeing now. And I know, remember when we started, I claimed to predict the future, which I proved that I could do very much. But I also didn't understand how social media worked at all. I didn't understand that you had to follow people on Twitter in order to get interaction. Do you remember those first 3 months? Oh, that was crazy. But I told you I've done the impossible so many times before. Let's do it one more. Let's do it for the audience. Let's hit record. Now, when I hit record initially, we started with just the microphone because I didn't even realize we should have hit record on the camera as well. So it took us a little while to get into that. But then we started doing that as well so that we could get here, to this point where there is no more predicting the future, okay? Now all we can try to do together is hold our finger on the pulse. Because what is happening now is a brute force attack on your consciousness. Those of you that play strategic games where you have to try and take over another person's fort, like computer games and things like that, there's different level of important characters you can build, and they all cost more. Or you can build the cheapest character and just make an infinite number and brute force attack your enemy. This is a war strategy game as well. And what is happening to the American public at this moment in time is they are brute force attacking your consciousness with so much information and so much bullshit that it is almost impossible for you to follow any common thread. They're throwing everything at the wall, and who is they? I'm talking about everyone. Everyone is in a power grab at this stage of the end of an empire. Excuse me. I'm trying to clear something through my system, and I've been having an unbelievable amount of success doing cardiovascular exercise and spending time outside in the cold. I know that may be counterintuitive to you folks, but I'm really fucking good at it. Now, where were we? We were talking about the brute force attack on the American consciousness. Now, this attack is being carried out on all platforms, in all distribution channels that would be received by the American public, the newspapers. I mean, still commercials, television, movies, plot lines, Hollywood, and our celebrities. Anyone who's still continuing the few that remain to watch the legacy media. It is being carried out online. Social media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram for sure, Twitter, Rumble. That's right, because these attacks, brute force attacks, are especially useful on these successful channels that are distributing good information so that people may make informed decisions. Are you starting to get the picture now? Because what I'm about to do is read off a list of just possible ways that we could take this podcast, just different directions. We could discuss each one at length as to what is going on, not only in the current events, the culture, but also the consciousness. I'm going to try and touch on as many as I can in this discussion. But it's just not possible. It's just not possible, especially if you don't have the amount of time to dedicate to this. And the problem with the brute force attack as well is you have no choice but to rely on trusted allies. And that is why I am so thankful that I spent the last 10 years at least 10 years spending almost all of my available free time building up a network of resources who I have guessed and checked time and time again for their authenticity, their accuracy, and their knowledge base. So I have certain people in different fields that I can go to and know that I can rely on certain reporting, investigation, or just a perspective lens that they have shown time and time again. We've talked about all of these people on the podcast. These are not just the Joe Rogans with the culture, not just the Jimmy Dores with the current events and the Matthias DeStefanos, the Robert Edward Grants with my consciousness, the collective consciousness that we're trying to discuss. These are the Matt Taibbis and the Walter Kerns and the Bari Weisses of the world. These are the Sagar and Jetty, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kalinske. These are the Marshall Kosov, the Mike Benz, Michael, there's so many. the Glenn Greenwalds, the Whitney Webbs of the world. This is why I find my relationship with those people so important, because being able to rely on your friends to just give you some sense of authentically how they see the world is invaluable in times like these. So, that is just a minuscule amount of the information that I take in on a regular basis that I have now dedicated at least full time the last year, probably exponentially more than that. So I can sit here with this list and we can start to run down things. Now we're 12 minutes into this, which is insane to talk about, but that is really the preparation that we need, because we're going to touch on so many things with so many aspects. The first of which is aliens overhead in New Jersey. My buddy Walter Kern and Matt Taibbi have compared it to the War of the Worlds. That old, if you know, you may know it as a movie. You probably know it as a movie. What am I saying, you people, if you even know it at all? But it was a radio broadcast back in the day when someone would broadcast news radio. How could one ever think that someone would just be telling a story for entertainment purposes? Back in the days, back in the original days of radio, this was a means of communication to get information out. No one could even open their perspective up enough to think maybe this is all a joke. People went to bed that night believing the world had been invaded over Princeton, New Jersey, just outside of New York City, by aliens. And here we are today in 2024, very close to that same place in New Jersey, and we have drones the size of cars overhead in our military industrial complex who are supposed to be there to protect us, to answer these questions, or at least explain to us what they are. Or perhaps, and right now they're saying they don't know. They believe them to be drones. Well, how do they know? This is all hearsay. Have you shot one out of the sky? The public has not reported any shot drones out of the sky, and that's how we've confirmed that it's a drone, because we shot one down, and now that it's on the ground, we see that it's a drone. And how could this conceivably be for our own protection? Not telling us this. And if this is some sort of test of our own equipment, why is it not being carried out on a military base or in a third world country away from our peering eyes? So many questions about the bright lights overhead. What is the difference? That's what Walter and Matt talked about. Between the War of the Worlds in the days of Orson Welles and today. Back in those days, people were creating the entities as a figment of their imagination because they were listening through the radio. But today, we can see them with our eyes. We can videotape them with our cameras. We can share them on social media. We can have this experience collectively with our neighbors, going outside and looking into the sky and seeing things that we are unable to identify flying above our restricted airspace. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty nuts. And it's not like the White House has shied away from enlightening us to the fact that there are alien objects in the sky. They've come clean about a lot. There have been several Pentagon-approved whistleblowers very careful to only allow certain amounts of information out. Controlled information. What an incredible story that could captivate the minds of many. And I do see that on the legacy media a bit, but not getting the coverage one may think that it deserves. Now, seeing these things in the sky, does that make them any more real than they were before for those people that were listening over the radio? We now have the ability to project images into the ionosphere using advanced satellites that are already in the sky above our heads. In addition to HAARP, which we've discussed at length before, technological weapons that are able to control the ionosphere from the ground. Could these be projections designed to scare us? Who knows? That is just the first story. Excuse me, guys. Excuse me, I don't have a dump button. But, oh my God. CEOs are getting gunned down in the street. Can you believe that? CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are getting gunned down in the street, and we're going to return to that one. The Romanian presidential election was canceled. They say because of Russian misinformation. The French government is in complete and total disarray. We covered that last week. Syria has fallen. The Bank of England has now made it legal to not disclose the identity of bailed out financial institutions so that fear doesn't corrupt the capitalist marketplace. 100 national security officials, potentially the same 50 that said the Hunter Biden laptop was misinformation, also said that Tulsi Gabbard, or signed a petition to prevent Tulsi Gabbard from taking over a position in the Trump White House. The president has pardoned his son in a sweeping pardon that reaches back to, I believe, 2014. He is also considering pardons for a bevy of other officials. Some of them worked directly for him. Some of them were appointed to positions like Anthony Fauci at the NIH. And some of them are former congresswomen like Liz Cheney, who are being prematurely pardoned for crimes that have not even, at this stage, been alleged in a court of law. There is some talk being discussed about the next administration looking into some of these things, but none of that has begun. There have been no formal charges filed. There has been no conviction in a court of law in a peer of their own, or by a jury of their own peers. And the president, who The legacy media and just about anybody with eyeballs can see is not in charge of the United States government is now looking to pardon these people, or at least consider it as well. Float this trial balloon past the American public. $50 billion of loan money has been released to the Ukraine, presumably to be paid back by the sale of seized Russian assets. Israel is still genociding Gaza. The military-industrial complex has now warned about a Pegasus software, which has the ability to access any phone remotely without the consent of the owner and completely secretive without the owner's knowledge, to be able to monitor all of the information being transmitted on that phone, including when the phone is not turned on. This is a software that the military has had access to and now fears that the Trump administration is going to utilize against former Department of Justice, White House, and government officials. So I told you. What did I say? The deep state is undefeated, are they not? Are we not clearly in the middle of World War III and utilizing tactics, especially this brute force, psychological, military-grade attack on your consciousness by releasing all of this information, this crazy information that cannot be parsed by any normal individual who is leading any semblance of a normal life, which is why there are people like me and my friends out here trying to parse through all of this to try and highlight some of the very important things that are going on in our current events, our culture, and our consciousness. And that's what I'm going to try and do. Now, let's return to that alien attack just momentarily, and then we'll get into some of the other informations, the alien attack. See, I already want to. An alien attack would serve no greater purpose than to further back up my point, as I understand this reality better than anybody else at this moment in space-time. But what it really reveals is this long-seated secrecy that has existed within the United States government, that has been being kept not only from the public, but many of the politicians at the highest level by the military-industrial complex, which gets to operate in the darkness because of words like national security. The strategic release of this information has been slowly released to the public, presumably because there is a long, ongoing plan to try and stage one of these so-called alien attacks in an effort to scare the American people into giving up more of their civil liberties and their rights, so that we will beg the government to do something that we once deemed too crazy to do. Like lock everybody down. Okay? So these drones that are in the sky may be some sort of longer ploy to dupe the American people, if they are not just a distraction from the heist of our currency that is currently ongoing. Now, one of the most eye-opening stories to me was this CEO's murder in cold blood on the streets of Manhattan in the middle of broad daylight at 6 a.m. An assassin walked up behind a CEO as he was leaving his hotel and executed him on the street. His gun potentially jamming, this video being released to the public so that everyone has this image burned into their mind about just how things can go from now on. It doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter how protected you used to be. We now exist in a new reality. And what this reveals is there is someone somewhere in a room who at one point previous to December 2024 thought that murdering a CEO in broad daylight was too far to go to achieve some goal that is aligned with their incentive structure. That would have been too radical a move to play. But what has been revealed is that is no longer too radical of a move to make in this current environment because of the craziness that's going on. What was the immediate move? Fortune 500 companies, especially healthcare, started to pull down images of their CEOs. They started to remove all of the images of their higher management. So you no longer get to know who these people are implementing the policies that control your life. Isn't that interesting? That seems to be a great benefit to the privacy of executives everywhere. It would also seem that extensive security is now going to be a budget line item expected to be picked up by the corporation. Because how could you not protect your management when there are crazy people on the streets assassinating CEOs? My guess is their travel is going to get exponentially more comfortable. Now I feel horrible about the loss of life. I empathize with his family. I have compassion for what it will be like to lead a life without a father or a partner or a son, a friend. Each life that is lost is a hole in many people's lives, which is why I could not believe the celebration of former Washington Post reporter Taylor Lorenz, who went as far as to double down on the celebration of a CEO who denied coverage to so many people, even though that is a responsibility to the industry that he is in, the health insurance industry. They would not be able to run their industry if they gave everyone coverage for everything that was requested. Perhaps I'm being too sympathetic to that industry as it exists. But I don't find it heartwarming to ever dance on someone's grave. And this stage of American capitalism is one I haven't seen in a long time. One that I was never on this earth for, but as I understand it, it's very similar to the mafia days of the 80s in the streets of New York when mafia bosses were getting gunned down in the street. Now, could we begin to look at these CEOs and compare them to mafia bosses as the regulatory capture in the United States has become so prevalent? As each one of these industries has become their own unique monopoly or oligopoly, controlled by very few hands, has the mafia state began to eat itself? These are all questions that I have begun to ask. All reasons why I'm very happy I am not in corporate America. All reasons why, if you're in corporate America, this may be a time where you want to reconsider your day-to-day operations. This may be a time where you want to reconsider your day-to-day decisions. Oh, you may even want to reconsider your career at large, because it certainly seems like there is a green light to start screwing around in a way that there has not been a green light in the past. And for everyone's sake, I hope this stops immediately, and that is the last we ever have to talk about it. But oh, it seems like these are the days where we are really going to see people's true colors, because if you do not want to be wrapped up in this, then get out of it, because I know people who will be drooling only to get further into this. You need to know that those people exist. Those people right now are licking their chops because this opens the door to so many more possibilities on the way business can be done, and profits can be consolidated, and we can gain more control, because there are some people that don't care about anything except for control and power. There's a whole separate, different group of people that only care about money. And these new possibilities means that there are new ways for these people to make money. And if you are naive enough to think that these people don't exist, let me tell you, I know these people personally. I have literally shared bedrooms with these people. They are my friends. They are my classmates. They are my fraternity brothers. And they're fucking all around good people, other than these little sociopathic tendencies that may just exist in their brain. But you have to love these people for who they are and understand their path is completely unique to them. I don't know if that CEO was on a similar path. He might have been the nicest guy in the entire world. I have also heard that he was going to testify in some sort of trial. Now, there would be a whole host of other people incentivized to take out anyone who is going to testify in trial. But I don't know too many people who would be promoted to the position of CEO of a Fortune 500 company who would ever testify against their own industry. I don't know any personally, and I'll let you know when I start reading about them. That was a crazy thing. And I have been following the business markets, Wall Street, for the last 20 years. I would expect to see these things in banana republics. But what I am here to tell you is the United States is a banana republic. How do we know these things? What evidence do you have, Mugsy? All of those stories, which one are you going to bring up now to further support your thesis of things getting crazy in this country? It is called anarchotyranny. That is the actual definition. It is a tyranny because the people, the citizens of the country, are unable to discern the laws that they need to follow to keep themselves safe or to keep themselves from prosecution and imprisonment because the law is so selectively implemented. That is the tyranny that we live in. There can be no greater example of this than my home city of Boston, Massachusetts, where after a federal election for president of the United States, Mayor Michelle Wu made a distinct point to tell the federal government and all federal law enforcement agencies that the city of Boston is a sanctuary city who will not cooperate with the deportation of illegal immigrants in the city of Boston. Now, what that means is, I want to provide a little context for the viewers out there, my very small audience who is very well informed. What this means is when people who have been convicted of child rape are released back onto the streets by city and state law enforcement, what they are not allowed to do is to inform any federal agencies of what has been done. So child predators are released back onto the street without having to update their living status, which is why so few people are informed by federal agencies of the pedophiles that live around them. This is just one potential violent crime that is unreported to federal agencies when convicted felons are released back onto the street because of this sanctuary city program that Massachusetts and its governing officials have decided to adopt. One that was not voted on by the citizens in that city. Now, in order to further support Mayor Wu in her fight against federal authorities The Boston City Council voted 13-0 to reaffirm their measure upholding Boston's status as a sanctuary city. That was an interesting vote. I find it curious when our government officials feel so confident in going against our federal government. Now, I am one that generally supports states' rights. But the reason that this surprises me is because I know about these Pegasus programs. I also follow money. And I know about how a lot of these politicians get their money. I also know about the things that they do publicly, right? And what certain things cost. And because their salaries are public information, one can deduce how they spend their money. Now, I am just a private citizen. I do not have access to the type of things like the Pegasus program that our military intel officials have made the public very aware of. I say that because the following morning after that vote, Tanya Fernandez Anderson was brought up on federal charges of corruption. Tanya Fernandez Anderson, a Boston City Councilor representing District 7, was arrested on December 6, 2024 by federal authorities on public corruption charges. She was indicted on 5 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of theft concerning programs receiving federal funds. Now, these two things could be completely unrelated. In fact, there are people who have tried to explicitly tell me that these two incidents could have nothing to do with each other but me. Oh, in my mind, I can't help but to draw these lines that just connect these dots that may or may not be a part of reality. Because my guess is Miss Fernandez is not the only person on that city council who is corrupt. She is not the only person who has been accepting money to do things and use their power to vote in certain ways and uphold certain ballot measures. That may be conspiratorial of me, but this is a free country. Last time I checked, that is not under assault yet. I'm allowed to at least think it and say it into a microphone on a podcast. Oh my God, that would be crazy. It would almost be like a federal shot across the bow. Saying, okay, if the state of, or the city of Boston is going to do everything within its power to stand up against the federal government, well, then the federal government has the power to focus its sights directly on the city of Boston, a city whose improprieties have been made world famous by the movie industry for its unbelievable corruption over such an extensive amount of time. It is unfathomable to people living in most other cities. Whitey Bulger is a world famous name because he was so corrupt that he controlled the city of Boston. I wonder what would happen in December 2024 or January of 2025 if the federal government decided to focus the full weight and might of its authority and investigative abilities into the Boston City Council or the mayor of Boston, who has, this past Christmas, made it very clear she thinks people of certain races are different than people of certain other races. Oh, these are just all interesting knots getting tied, or threads. I guess individual threads that one would have to be some sort of seamstress to weave together any sort of narrative of what's going on behind the scenes, because I, lowly me, with 230 followers on Twitter and 10 patrons on my patreon.com/Mugsythecreator, I could never put something like that together. Oh, that would be above my pay grade. But it seems like pay grades are changing, especially if I'm to believe who they caught doing that assassination of the CEO. Oh my God, you want to hear compassion? How could a stone cold killer who murdered someone in cold blood pee his pants when he got picked up by the police? Come on, put two and two together. This is right in front of your face. I am not smart. I'm telling you, I'm a dummy. I'm so stupid. I know nothing, but I see it all. It's right there. It's right there. This is why we do this. Someone has to. I tied, oh man, this time in business, this time in politics where things are really starting to get dirty again. Ari Shaffir, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right at the end of that Trump thing, before we got into COVID, Ari Shaffir said it's a dark time to be a comedian again. People are putting your jokes on the internet trying to cancel us. They tried to cancel Joe Rogan. You had to be a brave person if you wanted to be a comedian at that point in time. Just like you need to be a brave person if you want to be the CEO of a corporation now, or you want to be a politician going up against the federal government. Things are really getting real. We're not just talking about conjecture anymore and hypotheticals. We're talking about real deal consequences. That city councilor is probably going to see some prison time for corruption that my guess is very blanket carte blanche. But nobody else is facing those repercussions. That's a shot across the bow if I've never seen one. If I've ever seen one, oh my God. I'm telling you people, I'm a dummy. I am so dumb. So we talked about that. We really boiled it down to local politics versus the federal government and corruption and fucking governments across the country. I mean, the world. Governments across the world right now are facing a world at war. Syria fell. The government of Syria, a Middle Eastern country, and the leadership, Assad, of Syria, reappeared in Moscow this past week. Damascus is just littered with violence, a violent uprising. There have been military attacks on strategic assets in the region from countries that may have been using this instability as an opportunity to remove known targets, whether or not they had anything to do with unseating the regime's power in the first place. Crimes of opportunity. And we've talked about Romania canceling their presidential election because of Russian disinformation, allegedly. So, seemingly, the means of democracy are being removed. They had already been removed from the Ukraine because of its conflict. Apparently, you can't ask the people if they still like the current administration when we're at war. I mean, we've done that countless times in American history, but that would be something too crazy for the Ukrainian democracy. And while I am no Middle East expert, I have not even taken the full time to dive down the rabbit hole, which I may do, I may not have the time to do because of the reasons we were just talking about. But in the 40s, the CIA has admitted they upset a regime. They said that that was unsuccessful, and it led to several decades of instability in Syria until this Assad regime was able to maintain some semblance of control. Curiously, the regime the CIA previously upset was also the Assad regime. This young former dictator's father was the last CIA admitted regime toppling in Syria. Doesn't mean we did it this time. In fact, the Taliban is receiving much of the credit. The Taliban, someone who has significant military power. Where did they get those military weapons? Afghanistan. When the United States pulled out of Afghanistan and left all of our military equipment, which we knew would be taken over by the Taliban. Interesting. So, by proxy, we armed the regime that overthrew or allegedly overthrew and is claiming some sort of credit for overtaking a government. These are all just things. These are all just things that exist out there. And it is so crazy what is going on. And that's exactly why I started this broadcast, The Universe According to Mugsy, by me, Mugsythecreator, because there is so many different ways. There's just so many different perspectives and lenses we can take a look at this world through in all of the ongoings, the things that are happening today. It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't see how we could call this anything other than a brute force attack on our consciousness. That's it. And the consciousness is the only thing you have control over. That is all. So remember, you have the ability to choose your thoughts. Do not pretend like you're going to be the you're going to be the one that's going to solve the world's issues. Don't try and do exactly what I'm doing, okay? Um, only focus on the things that you can control, creating your own reality by the thoughts that you allow to enter your brain and your consciousness. This job, digging into all of that darkness so that I may summarize it for you, is a dark job. You have to have a dark mind to do it. You have to think in dark ways. And you have to see everything. That's what I'm at least attempting to do so that you don't have to. All right, guys? You don't have to dive into all of it. But you have to live in our connected construct, that culture that we create. So do your best to try and control your individual consciousness so that it will have its appropriate impact on our collective culture, and we can change some of the current events that we just talked about the last hour. This was a current events packed episode, but as you can see, we tied it all into aspects of the culture and the consciousness. So it has been a pleasure talking to you guys again. That was chapter 53. I have no idea where the world's going to be next week. Take back your consciousness. I love you. I'm out.